Now that you've written down the techniques you're going to try to defend against from the first two videos, we're now going to examine what it looks like and the possible techniques we wrote down that can be used to defend against it. Stay tuned! We'll talk about it. Welcome to Shihan's Dojo. I'm Shihan Marty Husband, and I'm here today to help you build your martial arts skills and knowledge. If you missed the first two videos out there of what we're trying to share and accomplish here, go up here and check them out if you'd like, or continue on. It doesn't matter. I just want to make sure you have a proper frame of reference of where we're trying to go with this. Today we're going to cover how you should look at your self-defense techniques and figure out what is going to be best used against them. We'll break down the angles, the variations, and the combinations that they can come in, and then we'll take a look at what techniques we might use to defend against them. This will help us to build up the theory that we're trying to surmise on how we can personally train for ourselves with our self-defense situations and make sure they're effective in the end. Perfect situations in self-defense do not always happen. I mean, it looks good in the movies, but for reality, it just doesn't work. And even in training, you can't really predict everything that's going to happen, but you can really focus on the ideas of what you're trying to accomplish to get to the actions you can do without thinking too much about it. Before we get started working with a partner, we have to break down what is the list of items that we're going to study with them. The very nature of these should be basic techniques, or how they might be used by angle, or even different appendage, or multiple appendages. For the purpose of this video, though, we're going to go through the basic street hook punch that you would commonly see. In doing this, we will have to try to break down what you think it would look like in the street, or if you're doing this for competition, how it might be used in a tournament or a ring situation. In breaking these techniques down piece by piece, we will establish the theory of how this technique is going to be used against us, and what possible things we might be able to study to defend against them. We do not start off fast with these techniques, but we basically go to examine what the body does in transition of the tactics when they are used. This includes understanding these various angles and how the tactic might be applied against this in a fight. In doing this, we better understand the motion that's going to be coming at us, that we might be able to see the energy and flow of that tactic in order that we might be able to redirect or block that technique as it's coming in. The theories that are built up with these attacks will give us an idea if our self-defense is eventually going to work or not. In doing this slowly, we can see how the body will drop or curve around when we're trying to do this punch. That way we can analyze the flow of the technique to design the technique that we might use to oppose it. Once we speed up, we will see how much speed becomes a factor in what we might have to deal with, and the kind of motion that's being created when we're doing this. We also need to consider the aspects of the coming from the opposite direction to make sure we cover that area at some point in our self-defense studies too. We have been stepping forward here to show you basically how these techniques would look in a street, but what if they throw it from the rear and it's still a hook punch? You have to address this type of a situation that possibly might come instead of stepping forward with a swinging hook punch. We must always remember that in a real self-defense situation, you really can't plan how somebody's going to throw a technique at you in self-defense, so you have to build up your tactics around the way it's coming at you and how much time you actually have to bring in your technique. It will be necessary in some ways to utilize that technique across the board for many different actions that could follow. The next aspect we have to worry about is the understanding of a possible theory of what can follow after the technique is being used. In most situations of self-defense or competition, there's usually more than one technique, and in some situations we may not be able to control the outcome of it. We need to take this theory to the next level, in that you look for the possible techniques that can follow in the flow within it. This can be a vast array of techniques, but we will keep it simple in understanding that a hook punch could be followed by a straight punch. The problem with this is most people aren't that technically proficient to throw a street punch as a straight punch. In a lot of situations, when the hook punch is thrown, the fighter will usually throw a couple other hooks from an opposite side and maybe an uppercut, which is a hook in and of itself. So we have to understand where the body placement is going to be when each of these techniques follow through. That way we can alleviate or follow through with the self-defense we needed if we're going to block, parry, or attack. Out of those, you should examine at least the first two in the series, that being the hook punch followed by another hook punch. It's important to put considerable energy in doing that. That way you can see the transition and actions of the body, so that if you want to add some sort of akijutsu or control to it, you might be able to do that depending on the situation. The truth of the matter is, if you don't stop that first technique coming in, it might take you out, or you can't possibly defend yourself against it because it's going to knock you out or hurt you. Next, you can see we're doing here the hook punch, followed by an uppercut. This is common from some street fighters and boxers, especially if somebody's had a little bit of boxing, to do these types of techniques. So you have to understand how the body will change, especially when that uppercut is coming straight up through the middle. Don't hesitate to practice with these punches to see how and where a continuous fighter might go without pausing. This will also allow you to establish how when you're attacking, you can flow through non-stop and continue till the fight is over. Now that you've also gone through and studied those, you should also study aspects of like a knife hand from the rear or a ridge hand or even from the front. Take these into consideration, and maybe the techniques you'll be working with will be able to work with every single one of them. That's a part of the whole thing of setting up this self-defense, so let's get back to the next part of this. The next part we have to do is, now we understand in our mind and physically how these techniques work, we're going to make sure the applications we thought of might work. Many of us who have trained in classical martial arts for years have done a thing called kata. The nice thing about kata is it really builds up muscle memory, so you can use that constantly without thinking. The body itself gets used to that, and it really just reacts according to the way you've always done it. Now, in doing this, you have to examine what we call bunkai, or take out pieces from that kata that might be useful when you're trying to use it against that type of a self-defense. If we break down each of these katas, we can begin to see different ways we might handle it, or the commonalities that are often used in several of these katas. If we think we understand how it could be applicable in this type of a situation, it will be advantageous for us. That way we don't think about the movements, we just do them, utilizing that muscle memory. Running through each of these scenarios, we can best see what will be easiest for us and have a better possibility of being our base for their theory or technique we are trying to defend against. We need to also make sure that we utilize the varying angles for those techniques in order to better understand how we might change our motion in a real situation. Now, if you notice in these studies that I'm showing here, it's something I teach my students a lot, is called a triangle block. In doing this type of a triangle block, the beginners have a better understanding it's one simple action to block and pat things away with it. You might want to break down these katas, though, in a simplistic action to kind of see where the triangles are really coming from in them. This doesn't mean we shouldn't try to apply other katas or self-defense studies that we've done, but we need to make sure we break down and look at it from different possibilities before we really get started. That way, when you're working with your partner, you have a couple things you can work with if something doesn't work right. Our primary choice for that may not always be the one we want to use. In some ways, it's like having a minor choreography of a dance move that you're trying to utilize the self-defense theory against the theory of the punch that's coming in. We also need to understand the fluidity of the techniques that we might use once we parry or block the arm coming in. When we have that, we can have the secondary flow through just in case we need to go in and block the secondary hook punch that they're about to throw to our head. It's a good idea when you're trying to practice and handle these situations, before getting a partner, make it clear in your mind what you're actually wanting to use and utilize it to be easily trainable, repeatable, and sustainable for realistic situations. Probably one of the hardest things to do is find something that's repeatable and completely trainable for almost all techniques. We'll cover that in another video and make you understand the difference of how something might work with one type of situation but not in another. I really had planned to do partner drills within this one video, but it's really a longer video, so we'll take this up in the next video, and we'll show you how to utilize it with a hook punch with a partner. After that video is done, we'll take that down to another video where we will cover what to do if our theory doesn't work out in practicing with our partner. Remember, we have to get these techniques to work at all levels, all ranges, and distances. So we need to understand that if we fail at some point, we need to make sure we can go in and fix it. Now, for some of you out there, this may seem like it's really a long video series, and it is if you break down what I'm trying to tell you. Maybe I could make it shorter, and it's easier actually to do in a seminar. It's hard to really bring it forth in a short little video. And if you're going through saying, well, just show us a technique and how to defend against it, that would be doing you a disservice by saying, hey, this is my technique and it works for me 100% of the time. It's not true. It doesn't work for everybody the same way. So you have to be aware of your own body type, your own way of handling things, because it's you that is fighting, not the instructor teaching you or the person helping you. In the end, your self-defense comes from you. You have to be confident and understand what you're trying to accomplish with it, because if you don't, when it comes time to do it in the street, you'll be thinking too much and the self-defense situation will be over and you could be very well hurt or worse. So remember, when you're doing this, really take the time to think about how these techniques are working and what the best practice is or how to best utilize them in a street or competition. Try to run through these techniques so a partner knows what's going on and how you're looking at it. Once you start training with your partner, they might be able to give you better insight or ideas that you can build off from there. Everybody has different knowledge in their heads that we sometimes overlook or don't see as they do. It's really a great way to build on what you're trying to learn and understand things a lot better from a different point of view. Now, if you like this video, give us a thumbs up down there. Share it with your friends. Tell everybody about Shihan's Dojo so we can make it grow. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down there. I would really love to answer some questions out there or comments or ideas that you would like to see here. Also, remember to stay safe in your training when you're practicing with a partner. Make sure you both are focusing on where you want the self-defense study to go. And we'll talk to you again here next time on Shihan's Dojo.